Welcome. In this tutorial, we shall demonstrate how to create a simple parallel ping experiment on Due. So first, click on that Create button. Then you will be redirected to the experiment page. There are two approaches to defining an experiment on Due. The first approach is the textual representation approach, where you will have to type out the commands to define the experiment. The other approach is the graphical approach, where you can use mouse interactions and the GUI to define the very same experiment. So, in this tutorial, I will go through the textual representation approach first, and then I will show you how to realize the same experiment using the graphical approach. So, starting off with the first approach, we shall see how to define the experiment. Every experiment on Due is divided into three subparts: scenario, constraints, and bindings. A scenario consists of multiple lines, where each line denotes an actor and the corresponding action. An actor could be a node in the experiment, and the action is nothing but the action performed by that particular actor. Constraints are used to realize the topology of the experiment. Your constraint lines could include link definitions, LAN definitions, or could even define the properties of a node, such as its operating system or IP address. Bindings are used to bind the actions to a respective command to realize the experiment on the testbed. So for this experiment, I shall create two actors, namely client and server. So the client performs the action ping server, and server performs the action ping client. Now I shall establish a link between the server and client. So I type in the command link client server. As you can see on the right hand panel, the client and server do have a link. Now moving on to the bindings pane, I shall bind the ping server to a respective command. So I can choose from the options provided here. In this case, I shall select ping node, but I shall add my own customizations to it. So in this case, I shall use the command ping-c 10 server, which basically means that I want to ping the server 10 times. Similarly, I shall bind the ping client action with the command ping-c 10 client. So now I have my scenario, constraints, and bindings set up for the simple parallel ping experiment. Next, I need to save the file. So before I save it, I will give it a name. I'll rename it to parallel ping, and then click on File and hit Save. So I can also use Ctrl+S to save the experiment. Now that I've defined the experiment, I could check the dependencies. So on the upper right corner over here, you can find two tabs, namely Topology and Dependency. So the Topology tab defines or demonstrates the topology of the experiment, while the dependency graph depicts the dependencies that are prevalent in the experiment. So in this case, ping server and ping client run parallelly. There are no dependencies between these two actions, and hence there are no edges between these actions. Now that you've defined the experiment, you just have to click on File, Export, Topology, and you can export it as an NS file or a mergedb file. So in this case, I shall export it to the NS file. I'll click on it, have the option of saving it. I save it and I get the file downloaded. I also have the option of exporting it to the mergedb file. I can also export the script as a bash file, or I can export it as a plain DO file. So this is the approach of creating the parallel ping experiment on DO using the textual representation approach. Now, I shall show you how to create the very same experiment using the graphical approach. For this experiment, you will need two nodes, a client and a server. Now, let's add each node to the graphical interface. So I click on Add Node, and I can click anywhere on the screen to add a node. So our first node will be the client, and then the second node will be the server. So now we have both of our nodes ready. We need to add a link between these two nodes so that each node can ping each other. So to add a link, I hold the spacebar, I press the left mouse button on one of the nodes, and while I'm holding the mouse button, I just drag my mouse all the way over to the other node, and then I release the mouse button. So now I've created a link between these two nodes. If you look at the textual representation, you can see that a link has been added between the two nodes, that is the client and the server. Now we need to add actions to these nodes. To add any action, you just have to click on your node and then click on Add Action that shows up in the pop-up bar. So click on Add Action. Then in this case, since it's a client, I'm going to ping the server, and my binding shall be ping-c, then server. And then I click on Add. So right now an action is associated with my client. I do the same with the server. I click on Add Action. My action name would be ping client, and my binding would be ping-c, then client. And then I click on Add, and my action is associated with the respective nodes. So if we go back and look at the textual representation, you can see the nodes and their associated actions, the constraints that are involved, and you can also see the bindings. So now that we have the topology ready, we can just click on File, Export, and export to any of the respective files that you need to run it on the testbed of your choice. If you want to have a look at the dependencies involved in this experiment, you can click on the dependency tab on the top right corner over here, and you can see the actions and their dependencies. Since in this case it's a parallel ping experiment, we do not have any dependencies between the nodes and their actions, and these two actions run parallelly. So there you have it. This is how you can create a parallel ping experiment using the graphical interface. Thank you.